Steve, good afternoon. How are you?
Hey, Father, your blessing. It's good to be here.
Blessing of our Lord. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for your time. I know how busy you are and how many things you've got going on. You remind me of the guy in the circus that has the plates spinning on the sticks, and you do a great job of keeping them up. So thank you.
I could say the same thing about you. You wear many
Well,
hats in the church, so
I don't do it as well as you do, though. So you make it look easy, and I know that people see the frustration on my face, and I can't hide it. So you do it with great joy. So it's great.
I'm a better liar.
Really,
That's all.
really thrilled that you're here. I'm a huge, if I can say this without sounding like a nerd, but I'm a huge fan of the stuff that you do. I think that you put out great material, great stuff. So today on Armed with Faith, we're going to talk about Be the Bee. We're going to talk about effective Christian ministry. We're going to talk about the retreats that you do and anything that you might be doing that I don't even know about, because you've got many more podcasts than just the Be the Bee. You've got something like 2 Men in a Bible I was reading up on and things like that. So we can talk about all this stuff and give people the opportunity to know where they can find it, how they can use it, and go from there. So Steven Christophorou is the youth director of the Archdiocese of America, right? The Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. So you literally are the director of youth and young adult ministries for the entire Archdiocese. How did that come about?
That's a fantastic question. I don't know. I started working for the Archdiocese when I graduated seminary. So I graduated seminary back in 2013. And at the time, Father Jason Roll was the director. And we ended up meeting at chapel. He was actually hiring a buddy of mine, Father Nick Leonis, who's now a presbyter in the metropolis of Detroit. Father Nick comes over to me and he's like, hey, you should meet Father Jason. You know, we hit it off immediately, ended up offering me a job. And I started working there part-time my senior year, my last year of seminary, and then really the summer of 2013. And it's really during that summer that we kind of put our heads together. And Father Jason's big thing was, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting the different results. And he's like, this is our youth ministry in a nutshell. We need to do something new. And so we kind of blew up the department and turned it into Y2AM. And the first big thing that we started doing was Be the Bee. And about a year after that, he ended up transitioning out of that role, and he was very insistent that I replace him. So within a year of starting at the department, I was leading the department, and things kind of moved really quickly. So how that all happened, I don't know, but it happened.
That's really cool. That's how the church works, right? Like you just kind of serve, and as you serve, you're placed into positions, and the qualified people get more and more put on their plate, and that's where the spinning starts, right? So it's awesome.
I guess, yeah.
Very cool. So Be the Bee, I think I know where it comes from. There's a great story of a monastic talking to a pilgrim. But if you share with us the story of Be the Bee, like what does it mean to be the bee?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It is actually something that I was not aware of until I spoke to Father Jason about this. So Father Jason was actually the director of Ionian Village back once upon a time as well. So he was your predecessor a few times removed in that capacity. And Be the Bee was his kind of go-to camp sermon back in the day. So when we were trying to think of what would make a good YouTube video series, because I was really into YouTube and there's all sorts of like science stuff and history stuff, but at the time in 2013, there wasn't really anything like intentionally Orthodox on there, just kind of, you know, random recordings of hymns and stuff like that. And, you know, probably Be the Bee is most famous more recently from St. Paisios, who would use Be the Bee as kind of a metaphor for discernment, that the bee is attracted to sweet things and the fly is attracted to filthy things. And we as Christians should be more attracted to the fly, to sweet things rather than filthy things. But you see it in St. John Chrysostom a little bit. You also see it very famously in St. Basil. He has this very classic letter to young men on the right use of Greek literature, where there was a controversy in his day about whether people could read Plato and Aristotle and kind of these big works of classical literature and risk their Christian faith. And he told them essentially to be the bee and to discern, to take what is good and leave what's behind. So we ended up taking that and it became kind of the theme for our series, but we kind of put our own little twist on it. And we've always used it less in the sense of discernment to try to sort of filter between good and bad, and more in the sense of trying to really be aware of God's work in our lives, to be aware of the presence of the reality of the kingdom of God, to open our eyes to what is real. So it's more than just sort of filtering between good and bad. It's really like learning to open up our eyes to the good that is sometimes invisible in front of us.
Very cool. How often does a new Be the Bee episode come out?
We normally try to do one every week, but we haven't done a new one since last Pascha, actually.
Okay, so it's been a year. I'm sure the pandemic has had a huge impact on that.
Yeah, it's a variety of things. It's costs and finances and staffing and all sorts of things. So we haven't been in a position to do a new one in a while. Maybe we'll be able to start again in the fall. God knows.
Okay,
but we've got 175 of them, so there's plenty.
I was just going to ask you. Yeah, I was just going to ask you how many episodes you have. You have I know you have over 100, so it's 175. And then where can people find these?
Yeah, they are all on our YouTube channel. So the easiest way to find it is to go to youtube.com/Y2AM, letter Y, numeral 2AM, which is just kind of our acronym for Youth and Young Adult Ministries, our department name. And you'll find Be the Bee on top of a whole host of other videos that we've done over the years. There's hundreds of videos on there at this point on a variety of different topics. Plus, if you just Google Be the Bee, it should come up pretty quick.
How can a youth volunteer, a parent, a Sunday school teacher, a clergyman, how can they use Be the Bee for educational purposes? What's the best way to implement it?
Yeah, it's really something that hopefully opens the door to a conversation with a kid. And I think that's actually, I'm glad that you brought this up. You know, when we started the series, it was never really about serving something that kids could kind of watch on their own. I think there's a lot of distractions and a lot of social media and a lot of things that sort of like keep people sort of focused on their devices and away from community. The use case of these videos has always been sort of in the classroom, in the home, friends together, family together, something that people could watch together, talk about together, critique together, wonder about, especially in the later episodes, because the series has kind of evolved over the years. The last maybe 30 or 40 episodes, we actually started creating like companion PDF workbooks for each one. So you could actually, as a youth group volunteer or a teacher, you could go online just in the video description under the video on YouTube, click a link, download a PDF workbook, print out as many copies as you want, give them to your class or to the kids that you're working with. There's questions, there's space for journaling, there's places to sort of, commit to concrete actions afterwards. We'll do an episode on philanthropy. How can I be more philanthropic in my life? So there's a lot of ways to do it, but I think the point at the end of the day is these are meant to be watched in community and hopefully applied in community. They're not just kind of abstract theological lessons, but they hopefully end with like a call to action that's challenging us to be more intentional about the way that we live as Orthodox Christians.
Well, then my apologies for what I said pre-show before we started recording about getting it in front of the right audience. It seems like you do get it in front of the right audience. I was thinking that you were using it for kids as an alternative to TikTok or something, but it's not. It's an educational tool. It's an opportunity for a teacher to really get a conversation started with a group of kids.
Yeah. I think that I don't like competing with social media. I don't like that. One of my challenges with a lot of the sort of media stuff that we see is that I feel like it takes the center of gravity of people's attention and it keeps moving it away from the altar and away from sort of Christian community. So, there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm not interested in kids just kind of like randomly scrolling and watching things and continuing to scroll. I'd rather that this be sort of a resource that is used in three-dimensional space. With people who love a young person, who care for a young person, who can sit down with him or her and ask some of life's tough questions and think about how to just sink deeper into the lived rhythms of what it is to be an Orthodox Christian. There's plenty of distractions out there.
I love it, and I love the title. I love the way that you're implementing it. Let me ask you, what are some of the topics that you've done episodes on? What things can people look out for? What are some of your favorites? What are some of your most popular? What was one of the most fun one to do?
Yeah, that's really good questions, because over 175 episodes, we've done sort of multiple series, we've experimented with different styles. The last 10 or so episodes that we did were walking through the Sundays of the Triodion leading up to Pascha. So what we did for the last 10 episodes is work on the Sunday Gospel and Epistle reading. So kind of the last little mini series of Be the Bee was a Bible study. And we'd look at the Sunday Gospel and the Epistle because they never change. For Palm Sunday, it's always the same Gospel and Epistle. Pascha, it's always the same Gospel and Epistle. So that was really a way to kind of like sink deeper into helping people chew on Scripture and understand what like the Scripture means for them. So that was kind of a fun long-term project. I think some of our most popular ones are really kind of like classic questions. What is a prayer rope and how do I use it? For example, that one has a lot of views. We did a mini series, actually kind of a mini catechism, starting in the 60s, I think it was, episode 66, with one question: what is Orthodox Christianity? That's kind of a big one for us. My favorite ones that I did, we had a little time there where we were experimenting with animations. And we did an episode on what habits are, for example. And we have a little story from the Desert Fathers about an elder sending out his novices to, pluck out a blade of grass, and then pluck out a flower, and then pluck out a bush, and then pluck down a tree. And, as the novice goes from plant to plant, it gets harder to uproot it, right? A blade of grass is easier to pluck than a full-grown oak tree. And the elder says, well, such are our habits. That habits kind of start very shallow, but they grow, and we have to make sure that we're cultivating good habits, which can become unshakable, and plucking out bad habits before they become unshakable. And that was kind of a very simple little visual metaphor, which we did in animation, which was a lot of fun. We did an episode called Pray Simply, Pray Always, which might be my favorite episode. It's from a real story from a book called Ascetics in the World, about a man named Simeon and his very simple prayer rule, again, done in that kind of simple little animation style, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, we did a lot of episodes over the years, and some of them have been a lot of fun to do.
It really sounds like it, and we have the capability to do these things. And I'm glad that our church has jumped into the 21st century and doing this. So I appreciate it. Let's talk about how I'm going a little bit backwards here, but how did you end up going to seminary? I know, reading up about you a little bit, you have a law degree. I don't know if you ever really took the bar and became a lawyer and worked as a lawyer as well, but how did Steven Christophorou end up at the seminary? You already told us how you ended up in the Office of Youth and Young Adult Ministries, but how did your life take that direction?
Yeah, it was definitely not part of the plan. That's for sure.
I don't think anybody can say that, right?
Yeah. I was a history major when I was an undergrad, and I had planned to go to law school and then graduate and work for a couple of years and then go into politics. And I had this whole big plan for myself. But I had an experience when I was in college that really sort of reminded me of this calling that I first began experiencing when I was really young. And so I had this kind of nagging thing in my head every year that I was in law school, like I should quit and I should go to seminary. And my spiritual father was very much like, look, finish seminary, like at least do that, and then kind of come to the conclusion. So I graduated law school. And at that point, I had a mountain of debt. So I was like, well, I got to start practicing anyway. So I took the bar and I worked for a really big Wall Street corporate firm for a couple of years, doing these like multi-billion-dollar bond underwritings and credit agreements and like massive litigations and stuff like that. So I did that for 2 years. And then in the summer of 2009, I just woke up one morning and I was like, nope, it's time. And then that fall, I was at Holy Cross.
Good for you. There's a lot of similarities that ring true with my trip to the seminary as well. Doing what you wanted to do as a kid, and then moving on to what you've been called to do. It really is a calling. I can't imagine you just doing this as a job. I feel like it's a vocation. It's what you were meant to do, and you're in that position for a place there by God, which is awesome. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in the last couple of years with the pandemic and with the youth that you've encountered?
Yeah, that's a really big question. I think that, and it's interesting, right? Like, I'm kind of seeing it directly during the monthly retreats that we do. When we had, a year and a half where we didn't do those retreats. Last retreat that we did pre-pandemic was in Providence, Rhode Island in February of 2020. And we kind of stopped. And then it was in September of 2021 that we picked up our monthly retreats again. So a year and a half of like Zoom and all these things, and then finally going back across the country, visiting parishes. And you notice that things are a little bit different. There's kind of a little bit of an edge that exists out there. And I think that my experience is really connected with some of the other big picture data that's out there. Like for you, Father, and for people who are listening, I'd really recommend the Springtide Research Institute. They do this annual State of Religion and Young People, and their reports for 2020 and 2021 have really been eye-opening, and the stuff that they have found have really like reflected my experience. The stuff that young people are struggling with isn't new. I think if anything, right, the pandemic revealed stuff that was already there and kind of heightened it. And I think what we're seeing is really like a loneliness and a disconnection and a lack of trust with the institutional church. And one statistic that for really kind of like highlights why that is the case is that Springtide found in 2021 that only 10% of young people reported that a religious leader reached out to them during the course of the pandemic.
Wow.
Think about that. Only 10% of young people said that a religious leader reached out to them during the course of the pandemic. 16% of young people reach out to the church when they feel like they have some sort of big question or whatever it is, right? Which makes sense. You reach out to people that you trust. And if people don't reach out to you in your times of need, you don't really feel that trust. I think that, we have spent decades as a church really doubling down on like programs and events that we've really taken relationship for granted. And the lack of those programs and events for a year and a half really sort of, I think, should highlight for us the poverty of some of the relationship, especially kind of our discipleship relationships in the church. And if we're going to rebuild in the years ahead, I think it's not to sort of go back to doubling down on programs and events, but to double down on like getting to know young people and to earning their trust by loving them and to cultivating those real discipleship relationships.
Yeah, I want to say that people like me that went to seminary were inspired by clergy that really had good relationships with us. Like I can look back on my youth growing up at the cathedral in Los Angeles and say that all the clergy that came through there, I had a great relationship with. They really were inspirational and did some great things. And my trip to the seminary was based on their inspiration, their relationship, right? When I graduated, there was a real, at the beginning of the new century, 2000, 2001, there was a real need for building buildings, right? Like it seemed like everybody in the country had some sort of building campaign going on. And it's nobody's fault. It was wonderful that people wanted to start renewing the buildings and growing things. And so I felt like the first 12 to 15 years of my ministry was more or less focused on building a building. And kind of like, I don't want to say that I neglected, because I think that we did some good youth ministry at the parish that I was serving, but there just seems to be like it wasn't the same, right? There wasn't the same investment in the relationship with the kids. And I can't tell you that how much that bothers me, that only 10% of kids said that a religious leader reached out to them. I'm going in my head trying to figure out, did a school counselor reach out to them? Did a teacher reach out to them? What do they consider a religious leader? But
yeah,
regardless, it's a sobering statistic. It really, really is.
Yeah.
With all of that. So you mentioned monthly retreats. How does a parish get to schedule something like that? How does that come about? Do you call the parishes and say, hey, I want to come to, Southern California and do a retreat for you, or what happens?
No, parishes just reach out to us. And what we try to do is find a month that works. The information about our retreats is available at our website, y2am.org/btreats. That's BEETREATS. So it's like Be the Bee retreats, just smushed together, Bee treats. And yeah, parishes that we get invited from parishes all over the country in every metropolis. We're actually, our next and final one of the season is going to be, the weekend of May 14th in Irvine, California. And then we normally take a break during the summer because, everybody is away for summer camp, everybody's away for vacation. And then we're actually planning on starting again the next season in August in South Carolina, I think it is. Then September, we're going to Georgia. October, I think we're going to Michigan. I forget where we're going to November and after that. But if months are available, because we do one a month, just send us an email, y2am@goarch.org, and we'll see if we can accommodate.
And what does that cost a parish to do? I mean, what is the investment from the parish?
Yeah, so unfortunately, our Leadership 100 grant is coming to an end. I think the last retreat that we're going to be able to pay for the grant before it finally ends is the one in August. Every retreat basically costs about $1,700–1,800. So there's two leaders for the retreat, me and Christian Gonzalez, who's my young adult ministries coordinator. We do two tracks. He leads the adult track, I lead the youth track. So 6th to 12th grade, we spend a full day with them, 4 sessions. He has all of the adults, clergy, parents, youth workers, grandparents, godparents, anybody 18 plus with them for a full day. And then we'll do a young adult event in the evening. I'll preach on Sunday, we'll go home. So that's kind of the full retreat experience. So we both fly into wherever it is, like hotel, meals for participants, because we try not to like charge for people, although if a parish needs to, they do that. And then some supplies for a service project that we do with the kids. The 4th session is always a service project. So that's kind of the rough estimate for what the cost is. Like I said, for the past 7 years, we've been doing it out of a grant, but that is coming to an end. So unfortunately, parishes are going to need to figure out a way to make that cover those costs going forward.
Leadership 100 has been very generous with a lot of youth ministry events, and I know that they've sponsored some things for Ionian Village as well. So that's thrilling that they've done that. With the Be the Bee, what are some of the benefits that you've seen from parishes after you've left? What's some of the feedback that you get from clergy about the I don't want to say residue, but the aftermath of a retreat?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think so. There's different categories of things, right? Like I said, one of the things that we do at the end of the day, so it's a full day Saturday, basically 9 to 5, and then we'll do a young adult retreat in the evening, a young adult event, I should say, in the evening. Especially since the pandemic, a lot of the feedback that we've been getting about our young adult events is that they've really been an opportunity to spark and recreate community. That a lot of young adult communities have really fallen apart over the course of the pandemic, because we try not to do like a lecture or anything. It's really an opportunity to sort of engage young adults with what they need from each other, what they need from the church. And so we've gotten a lot of really good feedback from clergy that this has been kind of a kickstart to really get their young adults, not groups, but kind of community back on track. For the adults, it's really kind of an opportunity for them to, we do surveys at the end of this. So I've got mountains of surveys over the course of the past 7 years now. For the adults, it's an opportunity for them to rethink what they think ministry is. Christian does a really great job about challenging some of the assumptions of what ministry is, and then lead them into something deeper, right? Kind of this conversation that we're talking about relationships, about really knowing who God is, as opposed to sort of giving them abstract pieces of information. So a lot of adults in particular walk away like spiritually refreshed from some of the practices that Christian leads them through. He leads them through prayer exercises, listening exercises, etc., and also just kind of really encouraged about a new direction for their work going forward. And for the kids, it's really an opportunity to give them a taste of what the church is the church can offer them. We do like silence workshops, for instance, where I'll coach kids through the Jesus prayer for about 20 minutes, teach them to be still, teach them to actually like reach out to the Lord with their hearts. And we get wonderful feedback from kids who've like never actually had an experience of God, because again, we hear sermons about him and so forth, but it's very rare that young people actually have somebody teach them how to pray. Or something simple, we do like listening exercises where we teach young people to be better listeners, because the thesis there is that being a listener is kind of the simplest way that we can share God's love for somebody. And so many kids approach us after that one in particular and are like, I go through most of my life not being listened to by anyone. And I feel like seen for the first time in my life when I have somebody look me in the eye and pay attention to what I'm saying. And it really reframes their understanding of what the church could be. Because like, what if the church was always like that? What if the church was a place where we felt we belonged, and we felt loved, and we felt seen, as opposed to a place where we felt like we have to put on our Sunday best and prepare to be someone that we're not. So I think for kids, it's really an opportunity to share them the church for what it could be and what it truly is. In adults, it's an opportunity for them to kind of reorient their ministry and encourage them a little bit spiritually. And for young adults, it's an opportunity to really kind of revitalize community that might have fallen apart, especially over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I really love that. That's a great answer to that question. Much different than I expected you to say. But let me ask you, you mentioned something here that I wrote down, and it's the statement that a kid said to me that got me to rethink the way that I do youth ministry and the way that I lead youth ministry. And that was, Father, nobody's ever taught me how to pray. And I was like, huh? And then as I thought about it, I was like, I don't ever remember anybody literally teaching me how to pray. I remember my mom telling us to pray. I remember watching my grandmother pray. I remember, seeing my father pray, relatives pray. I witnessed people in prayer, right? But nobody actually said, this is how you pray. And it's interesting because the disciples asked the Lord that, how should we pray? And he gives them the Lord's Prayer, right?
Yeah.
That was really eye-opening for me when this young person said that to me. And it got me to rethink the way that we do things, the way that the church kind of does things. And I want to ask you, what is it about youth ministry that you appreciate, that you enjoy? What is it that keeps you going, that motivates you?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think it is my relationship with the Lord and my knowledge of kind of like who he is. that I don't feel like I'm taking sort of a leap of faith and committing to something that may or may not be true, or some sort of like philosophical structure, or just an organization that has its flaws, right? But that it is ultimately grounded in my experience of and love for someone. And the feeling for me of being able to pass that on to somebody else. Because as much as I like doing like the videos, for example, I would trade all of the videos for an opportunity to just keep doing Be the Bee retreats until the end of time. Because there's something about spending a day with kids and teaching them to pray, right? There's something about spending a day with kids and teaching them to be open to each other, getting them into a circle and just praying together. Like that is the sort of stuff, like you said, like focusing on the practices and the lived rhythms of the Christian life, and giving them an experience of the peace that one feels in one's heart. Like that's really what keeps me going.
Steve, I got to tell you how I'm getting inspired. I'm getting like goosebumps from the things that you're saying, because some of the things that I'm thinking are, if you come into a community and you are doing a retreat, right? How quickly are you able to grasp the trust of the kids for them to really kind of open up and like kind of let down their guard for somebody who's visiting their parish for the weekend? How is it that you're able to like do that? Because I know that we have parishes full of people that are volunteers that say, Father, I can't get them to talk. I can't do this, right? But you seem to be going into a community, meeting the kids for the first time, dropping a great message, leaving with a seed planted, and hopefully the people that you leave behind are watering and giving it sun and some tender loving care, right? So that fruit develops. What are some of the tricks of the trade, let's say, that you can offer to people with how things go?
Yeah, that's a fair question. And the thing that I'll push back is that statement of like, Father, I can't get the kids to talk, right? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we have kind of expectations of what participation feels like in ministry. And if kids aren't meeting those expectations, we get anxious and we sort of push them. But the thing that I've learned for doing this over the last however many years, and like I see this especially when I get surveys back, and I sometimes find the most touching and deep comments from kids that didn't say a word during the course of the retreat. And they were like doodling and they sort of seemed totally checked out, but they were there. Because sometimes what a kid is sort of displaying on the outside is, again, they're like a kid, they're nervous, they're fidgety, they're whatever, but they're there sort of like in spirit, their attention is really there. My one rule that I will always do at the start of a retreat is this. I tell them, like, I have one rule and only one rule. You can do whatever you want during the course of this retreat, essentially. You don't have to ask my permission to go to the bathroom. You don't have to ask my permission to go to a snack. My one rule is that don't get in the way of somebody else who's trying to appreciate what's happening here. You can totally disrespect me. I'm a stranger who's going to be gone at the end of the day, but don't disrespect the people who are around you and trying to get something out of it. That's literally it. Like, there's no expectations about homework. I give them a workbook, but they don't have to give the workbook back or anything like that. It's very much like, just don't get in the way of other people who want to do something. I don't call on people, right? I don't sort of expect somebody to say something if they don't want to. I try to create as kind of a low pressure environment as possible. And I think that when you take some of the pressure off kids, because they get enough of that pressure at home, they get enough of that pressure at school, right? Teachers are calling on them, parents are calling on them, and just give them an opportunity to be loved as they are and accepted as they are, even if they don't say a word during the entire retreat. Like, they're there. If anything, I think the more that we sort of like impose our anxiety on them and push at them, the more they push back. Some of the most beautiful feedback, like we were in Milwaukee a couple of weeks ago now, and this one 17-year-old girl was saying, like, yeah, I really appreciate how just like non-pushy Steve was and not judgmental about this. And her younger brother, 13, was there as well, and he didn't say a word the entire retreat. And he had this like beautiful comment, like he was so into the entire thing, didn't say a word. And he too is like, Steve gave us the ability to show up as we wanted to be. He didn't pressure me to say anything. I really appreciated just being there and listening and taking something away. So that's it. Like, if I had to distill it to one thing, like, don't be anxious. Show up, love those kids. Don't expect anything out of them, right? It's our job to love them. It's not their job to love us. And God will do his thing.
That's great. That's great. So let's talk about how your office is helping parishes throughout the Archdiocese enhance their youth ministry. I know that the Y2AM, like you said, kind of rebranded itself back in 2013, 2014. And you've developed quite a few different ministries. We talked about Be the Bee. What are some other podcasts that you have out as well that people can tap into?
Yeah, the second podcast that we started after Be the Bee was Pop Culture Coffee Hour, which Christian and I do. Christian, who leads the Be the Bee retreats with me as well. That is something where we kind of watch movies, watch TV shows, listen to music albums, and really model for people what it is to engage with the pop culture of the wider world as Orthodox Christians. Really our attempt to take some of the conversations that we'd be having at lunch in seminary, right? Just like people who are deeply theologically engaged and faithful, trying to, not be hermits, right? Because we all watch TV and we all watch movies, and just sort of like teach people to not flee pop culture, but engage with it as Christians, to be the bee essentially, and look for Christ at work there. We've done a couple of other little ones that are sort of in hiatus at this point. We had a Bible study called 3 Men and a Bible with some buddies of mine from seminary. Father Nick Leonis, who used to work with me at Y2AM, Father Panayotis Bosnos, who's in the metropolis of Chicago. We had to put that on pause actually at the start of Great Lent. We've done a video series on like the books of the Bible. We've done Bible study series. We've done all sorts of stuff. But maybe the big resource that I'll highlight for everybody at home right now is an online training course that we developed called Effective Christian Ministry, which really gets at some of the questions that we're talking about here in terms of like leading effective ministry in our lives. And it's really about like strategies for understanding the needs that young people have, understanding the obstacles that prevent us from meeting those needs, and using the practices of the church, like the lived and embodied practices of the church, to not simply like fill their minds with head knowledge, but to initiate them into the rhythms of the Christian life, and kind of commit to practices in our homes and in our communities that can lead people to be faithful Christians rather than former Christians.
So this effective Christian ministry, I'm remiss because I thought it was effective Christian youth ministry, but when I see effective Christian ministry, I'm seeing that you're not just focusing on the youth, you're focusing on just effective Christian ministry, right? So explain that a little bit more. Explain, and the logo as well with the iceberg and all that. Explain this to us.
Yeah. So what's the fundamental problem here, right? The fundamental problem is that 60+% of young people can spend a lifetime in the youth ministries of the church and walk away faithful former Christians rather than faithful Christians, right? I use the metaphor of the mountain as a way to think about this, right? Because like mountains are these places of ascent that, Moses goes up the mountain to get the 10 commandments. Christ goes up the mountain to be transfigured and his disciples follow him, right? Like mountains in the scripture are always these places of like ascent and encounter and then some sort of transformation, right? We go up a mountain, we come back down different. But we have created this veritable mountain of ministry for the young people in our care. And instead of ascending this mountain and encountering God at the top and coming down committed, faithful Christians, they encounter nobody at the top. And 60, 70, 80, 90% of them come down former Christians. Where did those numbers come from? The Barna Institute kind of did this classic study a few years ago and found that 60% of young people, American young people, leave the faith tradition that raised them as they go from, committed young people in a tradition to disconnected young adults. If anything, that number has ticked up recently and they've revised their number to 64%. In my own life, though, 90% of the young people that I grew up with in the church have fallen away. So depending on kind of where you are, like that 60% number can be exceeded, as it certainly was in my life. And again, these are people who grew up like in the church, grew up going to youth group. The story that I tell in the course, and I'll tell here, there's this woman that I met, a young woman that I met in New York during a young adult event, who kind of like so perfectly encapsulates this need. It's this woman named Catherine, and we're getting together some young adults after this Be the Bee retreat. Actually, during the young adult thing afterwards, we're getting to know each other. Catherine comes in, starts sharing her story. She tells us that she grew up in that parish, and that when she was a kid, she was like a ministry rock star. She was there for Sunday school. She was there for youth group. She was there for parish volleyball. She was there for parish basketball. She was helping during the festival. I mean, she was at the church 3, 4, sometimes 5 days a week. Anytime there was a ministry thing, she was there for it, right? She was like a ministry all-star. She's the sort of person that adults would be like, she's a success story. And yet, the moment that she graduated, it was nothing gradual. She doesn't describe it in a gradual sort of sense. It was binary. It was like flicking off a switch. It was like, going off of a waterfall. She just became completely disconnected. And she came to us in her mid-20s. She heard that a young adult group was gathering, and she wanted to sort of reconnect with this group. And that phrasing was always interesting to me, that despite spending a lifetime in the church, she comes back not to deepen her relationship with Christ, not to reconnect with the church, but because she heard that a new group was meeting and that she wanted to belong to this new group. And I think about this in the sense of like institutionalization, right? People are like in the movie Shawshank. Have you ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah,
right.
Love it.
This is a metaphor that I use. Like Brooks Hatlin, right? That old prisoner who's there. When Brooks gets paroled, and Andy thinks that, these are not major spoilers for those who haven't watched the movie. Brooks gets paroled. Andy thinks he should be thrilled, but Brooks is terrified of the prospect. And he takes a penknife and he holds it up to one of his friend's neck and he threatens to kill him. And they finally talk him down, and Brooks kind of collapses and he says, it's the only way that they would let me stay. And what happens? He gets paroled, he leaves, and he does not survive the wider world. And he ends up taking his own life. And Andy and Red and all the friends are sort of talking like, why is it that this happened? And Red, with his wisdom, is like, well, Brooks was institutionalized. In prison, he was a respected man. Out there, he had nothing. He spent his life here. He became a prisoner. And what's a prisoner without the walls of a prisoner? And I think about somebody like Catherine, right, who spent 13, 14, 15 years in the ministry of the church by the time she was 18, and then was let loose on the world and immediately died as a Christian. Because what's a Sunday school student without Sunday school? What's a Goyan without Goya? Like, what if our youth ministry programs and events are not leading people to be Christians, but simply institutionalizing them and turning them into youth group participants? And when there is no more youth group for them to participate in, even though they're so active and engaged with it during their high school years, they disconnect because we never taught them how to seek Christ, because we never taught them how to belong to the church. We taught them how to belong to programs. And when those programs end, they go away. So that's kind of the central question that's here.
No, I love it, and it's good. Let me ask you though, regardless of how we all feel about different youth ministry programs like summer camps or retreats or Sunday school or whatever, we can all talk about the benefits of all and the shortcomings of all, right? Because how much are you going to teach in 45 minutes of Sunday school a week, and how much are you going to get done there, and how much of it is really edifying the listener in a lesson in 45 minutes. By the time everybody gets there, gets settled, gets their snack, how much time do you actually have to teach somebody, right? And you mentioned the mountain, coming down the mountain, and that's been a huge theme for us at St. Sophia Camp, the camp here in Southern California where I grew up and had the opportunity to serve as a clergyman as well. We talk about coming down the mountain and being different, and how are you going to live when you go down the mountain, and how are you going to participate? And one of the things that I've always thought that we kind of let our kids down on is that high that they feel at summer camp, and that commitment they feel, and that love that they feel from the people that are watching them, and the church is embracing them at that time. And then they go back into the world and they go right back to their old habits, right? How can the church, maybe through Be the Bee retreats, maybe through the Effective Christian Ministry courses, maybe through some other things that you're offering, how can the church and her ministries minister to these kids when they come down off of that mountain? Like, how can we connect with them? What are some things? The camp director, Perry Skaggs, and I, longtime friends, talk about this all the time. How can we connect with the kids in October? Because October, we feel like come Halloween, come Thanksgiving, is when that camp high has gone away and they're right back into their old habits again, right? So how is it that we can create some sort of ministry that comes off of the high of a program? Like I love Shawshank Redemption is a great movie, and that scene that you mentioned is really, really touching, and how he was part of that community and he didn't know how to be part of society. And you mentioned it really well. What's a prisoner without the prison walls? What's a Goyan without Goya meetings? What's a Sunday school student without Sunday school, right? So what is, if a kid identifies as an Orthodox Christian at a summer camp, what is it that we can do to get them to feel as an Orthodox Christian when they get to their home parish?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think what we have to do is sort of understand why summer camp works. And I think a lot of kind of casual observers of summer camp will be like, summer camp works because of the games and the this and the that, right? But I think, when you really get into it, I think especially those who have participated as camp directors, of camp counselors, et cetera, like summer camp works because we're actually meeting like the deep fundamental needs in the lives of these kids during summer camp, right? Summer camp is like the one time during the year when these kids are going to matins in the morning and vespers in the evening. It's possibly the one time in the year when they're praying before bed. It's probably the one time in the year when they're not sort of putting on airs and trying to sort of like fit into some sort of like socially constructed thing, navigating the halls of like bullying and so forth. Right? I think they just be themselves at summer camp. It's a place of silliness and lightheartedness and sort of honesty, right? It's a place of service where they're cleaning up after each other. It's a place of teamwork where they're working together. Like it's a place where Christ is at the center of everything that they do. And unfortunately, so many people sort of like reduce the summer camp experience to like, it's the pool or it's the games or it's the this or the that, right? What do we need to do in our parishes to sort of capture that? Like more of that, right? Like, why is it that our parishes are not places where young people feel like they can encounter Christ? Why is it that summer camp is sometimes the only time during the year when a young person is like exposed to the opportunity to do confession? Right? There's so many sort of basic things that are part of the rhythm of summer camp. And sometimes as casual observers, where it's like, well, we don't have the resources, we don't have the games, we don't have the this. Like, but you've got Jesus, right? And Jesus is not at the core of the ministries that we offer. That's really the thing. Like the way that we try to sort of like organize it for people so they can conceive of this a little bit. In effective Christian ministry, we list kind of the 5 core needs that exist in the lives of not our young people only, but really all people in our modern age, our postmodern age. And I'll recite them here very quickly. The first need that people have is to know Christ, right? The second need is to know themselves, which they can only really do by knowing Christ first. We know who Christ is, then I know who I am in the white baptismal garment that I receive from him, right? The third need is to know that we belong to the full community of the church, that I'm surrounded by other people who also know themselves in Christ. The fourth need is that we're empowered with a faith that makes a difference, that the call of the gospel actually matters and changes the way that we act with each other and changes the way that we spend our time and our money and so forth. And the fifth need is to be equipped with the teachings of the faith. And that's really kind of our core thesis for how we need to sort of like identify the needs that young people have and meet those needs with the ministry offerings that we give them. I think if we look at summer camp, like summer camp meets all of those needs. If we look at like kind of classic parish ministry, I think classic parish ministry tends to focus on that fifth need more than anything else, to equip them with the teachings of the faith. Right? We kind of focus in our parish ministries of teaching them Orthodox beliefs, teaching them Orthodox, right? The right opinions, filling their heads with these ideas so that when they go off to college, they won't lose it. But these ideas by themselves are just kind of like butter on Teflon, right? I mean, kids are not going to really be open to learning about the faith until they have had an experience of who God is, understand themselves in relation to this God, see themselves as belonging to a community of believers that are all connected to this God in this way, understanding that all of this matters, that ministry matters, that our activity in the world as Christians matters. And then we can sort of get into the nitty gritty and sort of begin getting deeper into the faith. So again, not to get into too much detail here, but I think we kind of do things backwards in a lot of our cases. Summer camp, when it works, is because it does it right. It gives people an experience of Christ. It helps them to understand themselves, not in the way they pose at school, but like to understand themselves first and foremost as Christians, to belong to this community of believers who are all centered around Christ, to know that their identity as Christians changes what they do, right? Because camp is a place of love and camp is a place of support and a place of mercy and a place of fun. And then fifth, we can have our Orthodox life session because like it matters at that point. Whereas I think sometimes in ministry, we sort of start with the Orthodox life session, the catechesis, without giving young people a why or reason to believe that any of this matters. So effective Christian ministry is an attempt to sort of like organize this and kind of give people a framework for understanding and then figure out like what this means for them and their parish. which we also have a coaching program to help parishes with as well. We have a cohort, kind of a 9-month learning community where we pair parish teams with a trained coach to actually help them work through some of these questions and think through like what their next steps can be as they try to improve their parish ministries based on some of these practices and principles.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I love that. In conversations with other clergy as well, working at summer camps and doing things, we've kind of come up with this notion that maybe we shouldn't offer confession at summer camps because kids are hiding behind, seeing Father Gary one time out of the year and telling him all my deep, dark secrets, and then I don't have to see him again for a year, and I can come back the next summer and do it all over again, right? So what the big push in the last few years prior to COVID was help them develop a relationship with their parish priest so that they can go home and have confession, right? There's an argument good for it and against it, and we don't get into it here. But with the cohort, with effective Christian ministry, and you get a team of people that are invested in those 5 points that you make, and getting the kids to realize each one of them, right? They're gonna start to live the liturgy is the goal of youth ministry, right? They're gonna start to live let us depart in peace, right? They're gonna live, take ye, this is my body, right? They're gonna live the creed. They're gonna do these things. How can a parish get their hands on effective Christian ministry?
Yeah, so there's the online course, which a parish can access at effectivechristianministry, all one word.org. Or probably even just Google Effective Christian Ministry Y2AM and you'll find it, but it's effectivechristianministry.org. So initially it's an online course, 13 online lessons, 3 modules that you can sort of access, individually register. I'm happy to create parish discount coupons. If like a team from a parish wants to take the course together and kind of work through it together, happy to create a discount code so that a parish team can do that. Once people have taken the online course, the cohort is kind of like the step 2. And once people have really sort of understood the basic framework, then we can pair you with a coach and work through a 9-month process where we figure out like how to create goals around smarter goals around figuring out how to apply the practices and the things that you learn in ECM to actually begin transforming your parish ministry. So think of the online courses like step 1, like learn the material. Cohort is really having a trained coach to help you kind of implement the material in your particular parish based on your needs and struggles.
And what have you seen from the parishes that have invested in this? You said a coupon, so I'm assuming that there's a small price to pay, right? Which gives people the opportunity to have skin in the game, right? Anything that's free is kind of discarded.
Yeah.
So when people have to pay for something, there's an investment. So what's the cost? And then what are you seeing from the parishes that fully invest themselves into the program?
Yeah, so the online course has a price tag of $75. That's for an individual registration. And again, we happily
that's for all 13 classes.
For the whole program, watch it as many times as you want for the life of the program. So once you're in, you're in. And that again is for the online course. We have over 1,000 people who have actually registered and completed the online course at this point. Awesome. We've gotten really wonderful testimonials from clergy who have been in ministry for 30 plus years, right? Some clergy are out there who's been like, this is what I've been trying to say for all these years. And you've given me the language to kind of articulate some of my hopes for my ministry in my parish. And we've gotten really wonderful feedback from like first-time camp counselors who are just taking their first steps into ministry. It's offering people kind of like a lot of clarity, and it's offering people kind of a very kind of simple conceptual framework that allows them to make decisions about what works and what doesn't work in ministry. It's really the 5 needs that we articulated that I mentioned earlier, 5 challenges that get in the way of those needs, and 5 practices that help us as the church meet those needs in the lives of young people. Then the cohort itself is more of an intensive process. We're actually just going to get ready very soon to open up applications for next year. It goes September to May, so it's a 9-month process. We want up to 6 people from a particular parish to comprise a team, ideally a diversified team, parish priest, ideally, a ministry leader, a young adult, right? Kind of a diverse group of people, different kind of stakeholders in the parish, a team of 6 to walk through this process for 9 months, get paired with a coach who's going to walk with you along the way. That's going to be $2,500 for the team of 6 to work with this coach and get that really kind of like intensive hands-on support for this 9-month process. So that's the kind of the two options that are available. Like I said, the online course, the feedback has been amazing. We've done a couple of surveys about this. The feedback has been consistently incredible. The cohort, we're actually wrapping up our first year cohort. We've been doing some surveyings, and people are already sort of seeing the transformative nature of this. We had a bunch of different parishes participate in this first year: Greek parishes, Antiochian parishes, OCA parishes, Armenian parishes, parishes in the US, parishes in Canada. We actually had an OCA bishop join the cohort with his clergy youth directors. So we had like a lot of like really interesting experience in year one, and the feedback has been fantastic. I mean, people have felt very supported by their coaches asking some of these tough questions, really coming away with a transformed understanding of what ministry can be, and kind of enthused about like now being able to like learn to put these principles into practice. And it's little simple stuff, right? Like one of the challenges that we give people during the cohort, for example, is just to sort of actually go out there and have coffee with some of the young people in your parish, right? It's very funny to me that it's such kind of this low cost sort of thing, but so many times we sort of opine about what young people need in our communities without actually taking the time to sort of sit down and listen to them, not as talkers, but as listeners. And even that, like simple exercises like that really open up the eyes of a lot of people. Like, this is what young people have. This is what young people need. This is what they're struggling with. So it's a really 9-month transformative process to lead people through these challenges and get them through to the other side with kind of concrete goals and next steps for their parish.
So let me ask you though, as you were saying that, I was thinking on the lines of in the mind of a parish priest, right? You said hopefully one of the 5 people or 6 people on the team is a parish priest. And as a parish priest, all I heard was, this is just one more thing for me to have to do. How much time is he investing? How much time is he getting his volunteers to invest into this program?
Yeah, 100%. At the very least, because again, the cohort is sort of centered around parish groups. At the very least, we require that any parish that is participating have the knowledge and blessing of their parish priest, because we definitely know that not every parish priest is going to be in a position to do this. Our hope is that all of the team participants are basically going to be willing to commit about an hour and a half a week, I think is what it is. Kind of like for a steady stream, to think about it like a course over the course of 9 months, because we have a rhythm of meetings, we have a rhythm of like assignments, a rhythm of webinars that people will watch, but we don't want it to be overwhelming, which is why kind of in our experience, as we're sort of, finalizing some of our materials for the next year, we really see in our experience over this past year that it really boils down to about an hour, give or take, every week during the course of those 9 months. So we don't want it to be too onerous. We just want it to be consistent so that we can kind of walk through this process and a parish team is sort of on the same page and can lead their parish forward together.
And where are you finding the people to lead the cohorts? Where are you finding these people that will be the representatives of effective Christian ministry to the people in the parishes?
Yeah, every parish team is going to have a parish point person, and that's really going to be the person who's going to sort of deal with the logistics between the coach and the team. That could be sort of like a really committed volunteer. It can be like an admin or an employee of the parish. It really depends on what makes sense for the parish. Somebody who's going to be kind of the most invested is generally going to be the point person, who's going to deal with some of the sort of like the scheduling and the other kind of like primary responsibilities. But the goal is that, there's a syllabus that is created for everybody. For most of the participants who are there, it's like showing up to the webinars, doing the homework and the assignments, and kind of like walking with the coach through this process. The point person is going to be the one person that has maybe a little bit more responsibility than everybody else. And every team is going to need one point person to kind of bear that responsibility for everybody.
And the coaches, where are you finding the coaches from? Who are they? Are they seminarians? Are they youth directors from other metropolises? Are they clergy?
The coaches are a really wonderful group of people from across the country, actually 2 countries. We have Canadian coaches as well. And we're actually in the process of hiring some new coaches for year 2. And it's a really wonderful group of people. Some of them have been, moms who have been parish volunteers for a long period of time. Some of them are younger people who are just a couple of years out of college, who have a deep heart and have a really wonderful track record of ministry. There's no sort of like seminary requirement that's needed there. What's really necessary is that people who believe in effective Christian ministry, believe in the principles that we're using, people that we train, that we vet. I mean, we have an in-person training for all of our coaches, and then we give them the curriculum and the tools to help support our parishes going forward. So that's actually another thing. If anybody out there is familiar with the program, is interested in potentially being a coach, definitely reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you and receive your application.
That seems like a great opportunity for a young adult to kind of serve the church and kind of perpetuate it, right? Like a Catherine to come back and be part of that and to help save other Catherines from going off that waterfall that you mentioned.
Yeah, our youngest coach this year is 23, and she's doing a great job.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I love getting our young adults involved in the church and giving them the opportunity to serve. Keychain leadership is something that I'm a huge fan of and love doing, and give them the keys to the ministry and let them run it. And you'll see how great and of an investment that is. Steve, I can't believe how fast this hour has gone by. Seriously,
yeah.
I have a million more questions for you. We might have to do another episode at some point. But let me ask you, as the director of Youth and Young Adult Ministries, coming off this pandemic, entering into a summertime where kids are really going to have the opportunity to go to summer camps, right? We've got a full docket for Ionian Village this summer. I know that the summer camps in our metropolis are getting ready for a full summer. I know that MBC, that I'm close to Father Ted Barbas up there, and Panos Kufos up there, and St. Stephen's is getting ready for some good summer stuff. What are some of the things that that you would, as the youth director of the Archdiocese, would want to make sure that you see come out of our programs? In all honesty, like you're the director of Youth and Young Adult Ministries, right? So from the programs that we're doing and we're instituting, what is it that you're hoping that we are doing during these programs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest thing to do is meet the 5 needs that we're identifying in effective Christian ministry, right? Young people need to know Christ. Are we introducing them to Christ at these programs and events? Not teaching them facts about Christ, but giving them an opportunity to sort of prayerfully encountering him. Are young people coming to an understanding of themselves, right, through our programs and events, to understand who they are, that authentically that they are children of the Most High God, that they are loved, right, that they are these forgiven sinners who are looked upon with favor by our Lord? Are they belonging to the full community of the church, or do they just feel like they're a part of this little sort of youth club, right? Do they actually feel like they are a part of something bigger? Are they being empowered with a faith that makes a difference? Does their status as Orthodox Christians matter? Does it change anything about the wider world? It's funny, we were recently doing a retreat, and one of the parish priests that was there, he said he really took to heart a question that we've been asking, and we actually asked in the B2B episode a couple of years ago, which was, if your parish disappears, would anybody notice? Except for maybe the lack of baklava during the food festival. And he's really recommitted his parish to a lot of philanthropic activity in the wider neighborhood for non-Orthodox Christians, because he's like, I realized that if our parish disappeared, nobody would notice. But if we're going to be Christians, we have to change that. And I think that in particular is something that a lot of young people have this passion for, right? To do something for people who are in need. So we can use that as a church, encourage them as a church. And then fifth,
Generation Z, right?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Generation Z wants to serve without a doubt. They want to get in there and they want to change the world, and the ceiling for them is been extended for all that they can do. Steve, I love what you've written here. I'm going to tell you that I'm the thief among thieves. I wrote down a whole bunch of things that I'll be using in my ministry as I go forward. I'm going to look more into effective Christian ministry, and I'm going to encourage the parishes that I encounter to look it up and be part of it as well. Can you give us some more information on it, repeat the information on it, so that people can know that the Archdiocese is producing things that they can use, that are tangible things that they can use in their parishes to enhance their ministry?
Yeah. So the online course, once again, is at effectivechristianministry.org. I'll put the logo up on the screen here as well so you can see it. effectivechristianministry.org, all one word. Once you go there, you can find the link to register. Any parishes that are interested in maybe sort of going through the registration as a group, feel free to reach out, y2am@goarch.org. That's our email address. Just send us an email. We can create a discount parish code to make it easier for parishes. And then there's the cohort, which is effectivechristianministry.org/cohort. And that's where there's information about the 9-month training program, pairing a parish team with a coach, walking you through this deeper application of understanding how the practices and the principles can actually transform your parish ministry. So one is the online course. That's level 1. Level 2 for parishes that are ready for something more. Take the cohort, get paired with a coach, figure out what this actually means going forward for your community.
Steve, I want to thank you for all that you're doing and for the investment that you've made and giving up your lucrative career as a lawyer, doing those fun things with the financial issues that you were litigating and all of that, to do this, to really invest yourself in the lives of our youth, to perpetuate the faith of our Lord in the lives of these young people that you encounter. So thank you very much for the work that you do, and thank you for being a guest on Armed with Faith. Really appreciate it. Have a fantastic afternoon. God bless the work that you do. And if there's anything that we can do to help you continue to get the word out, please don't hesitate to let us know. Have a fantastic, fantastic day. And again, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Christophorou, the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministries for the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America.